How are we doing, guys? Welcome back to the Let's Talk Boxing podcast brought to you by SimBoxx. This is episode 11 and the first of 2026. We've been on somewhat of a hiatus, as we like to do here at the Let's Talk Boxing podcast, but really excited to get back behind the camera, back behind the mic. And as always, I'm joined by my esteemed co-host, Jamie. Jamie, Happy New Year, man. How are you?
Happy New Year, mate. Yeah, and as you can probably tell, I'm quite happy myself. Yeah, I'm buzzing. Yeah, we had a bit of a hiatus, but I've been really itching to get back at it, and I'm glad that you dropped the message. We're back in, starting off 2026 with a bang. Got lots to talk about, lots to go over. Yeah, man, I'm geared up. I'm ready, mate. I'm ready.
Yeah, honestly, it's one of those times of the year, in it, where it's the cliche to make New Year's resolutions and whatnot. But one thing that I'm determined to do is be more consistent with producing content, with getting behind the mic, and more so with the Let's Talk Boxing podcast. Because even when we are on these hiatuses, I find myself wanting to share my opinions. There's so many different fights that we've missed, and we're going to go over a few events and whatnot in today's podcast. But yeah, I'm just chomping at the bit sometimes. But then I think, I don't want to just drop one podcast here and one podcast there. If we do it, we kind of go on a bit of a run. So yeah, definitely looking forward to getting back into it today. Get the niceties out the way. Did you have a good Christmas? The holiday period, you enjoy yourself?
Well, I had a very, very Merry Christmas, I'll be honest with you. It was very merry. It was good. Spent a lot of time with the family and that, the missus and her family. It was good. It was good to have the time off work and have everyone together. Speaking of New Year, though, I fell asleep, mate. Which I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed of myself. About half nine, 10 o'clock on New Year's Eve, I was gone. So I didn't get to join in the New Year celebrations. But in a way, I was kind of glad because I weren't hanging come the 1st of January. And obviously, one of my resolutions is to take a step back from drinking and going out and doing stuff. So it actually ended up benefiting me quite well. What about yourself?
Yeah, all good, thanks, mate. Yeah, well, obviously with the 9 to 5 jobs in retail, so extremely busy right up until Christmas, and then got some good days off. I'm sure, like you're aware, I've been an avid follower of FC United in Manchester this season, so I've been following them home and away as much as I possibly can. So I got to a couple of games over Christmas and New Year, and weather permitting, we'll be at a couple of games this week. So yeah, really, really good. And as you say, spending time with family, overindulging in food and drink, but really enjoyed it. But let's get back to the podcast, Jamie, what we're here for, the boxing. What we're going to do today, guys, is have a bit of a look back at 2025, some great events, some great shows, some great knockouts, and an all-round good, solid year of action. I think sometimes, Jamie, you can get wrapped up in this Saudi investment into boxing, some of the shows that go out as part of Riyadh season, the ring events, under the influence of Turkey, Al Sheikh in his deep, deep pockets. And we've been spoiled, I think is the best way to put it. That 2025 was a good year, maybe not as great a year as 2024 or 2023, but that's because we've been spoiled, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that yeah, definitely we are spoiled. We are getting the biggest fights and the best people fighting each other. But then at the same time, as good as it is to have the Saudi investment, and we're all like feeding off it. I feel like we need to also back the small hall shows, and for us being from England anyway, our British cards that aren't backed by Turkey, that aren't on Riyadh season. I think we just need to keep them in the forefront as well, and because we have been spoiled, but I feel like we've been spoiled that much, it's kind of taken away from the local domestic scene as well. But I think we've had some good domestic fights that have come up recently. I'm sure we'll touch on some of them. Some absolute bangers that have kind of gone under the radar because of Riyadh season and also because of the new influence of boxing as well. Whereas I think we had some fight cards that were more domestic level that were actually a lot better to watch than the big overhyped shows. There was one weekend where the big overhyped shows got all the attention, but the actual best fights were the ones that didn't get all the recognition and weren't, marketed and promoted like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to further on that comment there with the need to help small hall boxing in the UK, that's one of the directions I'm looking to go down with the channel with SimBoxx this year. That I've already put out there a couple of posts about Pat Barrett and Black Flash Promotions, and they've got a show already advertised for Valentine's Day, the Valentine's Day massacre card that they've got going. They've got a show a week later in Liverpool, and they also announced that Black Flash are going to be co-promoting Zelfa Barrett fighting for the IBO lightweight world title. Which now the IBO it's maybe not a high held in as high regard as the other four sanctioning bodies, but it's a world title in its own right. And I think for Black Flash to be co-promoting a show with a world title of sorts on the line, I think is a huge deal. And like I say, that's the direction I'm looking at take SimBoxx down this year. We came up under the guidance of Kieran Farrell and Vicious Promotions, and he gave me a lot of help and advice in those early days. And he kind of went down south and worked with Daniel Dubois. So yeah, this year, going off on a bit of a tangent here, but that's a direction we're looking at going down with the channel this year. So I really look forward to that. As it is on today's podcast, we've got four categories that we're going to go through. I'll chuck mine out, you'll chuck yours out in terms of our picks. We'll give a couple of honourable mentions if there's other people that you want to throw in there. And then we'll kind of have to come to an agreement here. There can only be one winner. So if it comes to it, we love a debate. You know what we're like. The first category, Jamie, that I'm going to chuck out there is the prospect of the year. Now, this can be UK based, it can be international. I was going to try and do separate categories, but I thought, you know what, we'll combine everything into one, we'll streamline everything. So the first category is prospect of the year. Do you want to chuck out your nomination?
You know what? It was one of them with the prospect of the year because I was sad. I was thinking there was only really one name for me, but then it was like we're at a stage where can he be called a prospect anymore? So obviously you smile. I think you know who I'm going to go with, and it's the big yoke Moses Atalma. I think what a phenomenal year he's had, and I think he's you still got to probably consider him a prospect because of his age, but because he's gone up so far in levels quite rapidly, you could probably say he's maybe not a prospect, but in my eyes, I still think he is on that level of being a prospect. Going into 2026, he's not going to be, but this is based on 2025. So I'm going to go throw my pick out as, yeah.
Yeah. So before we have the big reveal, my honourable mention is a young female fighter coming up. She's only 19 years of age. She's 3-0, and that is Tia May Ayton. I'm not sure you've seen her on some of the Matchroom undercards, but this girl is dynamite. Katie Taylor's come out and said that she believes she could go on to be the greatest female boxer of all time. And if the current greatest female boxer of all time is bestowing that honour upon you, you've got to be doing something right. And Tia May Ayton, she went 3-0, three stoppages, which is a rare occurrence in female boxing, given that they only fight over 2 minute rounds. And some
Yeah.
people argue the disparity in power compared to the male counterparts. But she's dynamite. I think she's fighting down in bantamweight, but being only 19, she's going to have the time on her side to be able to go up through the weight. So, yeah, if you've not heard the name already, go check her out, TMA Ayton. But we're unanimous here. I was hoping for a bit of debate, but funny enough, you took the words right off the tip of my tongue that this is the last year where he could be put in this category. In 2025, he
Yeah.
knocked out Mike Balogun in 2 rounds on the Josh Taylor Echo Asuman undercard up in Glasgow. Then he knocked out Dillian White. Maybe a past it Dillian White, but still a Dillian White. A dangerous, experienced operator. He dealt with Dillian White inside a round and in emphatic fashion. The first time Dylan faced that power, felt that power, he didn't want to know.
First time you've seen Dillian like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So early on in a fight.
And Dillion's a warrior. He got to his feet, but he was done, and the ref made the right call in waving that off. But I thought not only did he knock him out in the first round, but he was headlining that event. He out in Saudi, and it was part of the Riyadh season, and that just shows the belief that he's got from his backers with Frank Warren, Queensbury Promotions, of course, Turkey Al Sheikh. So yeah, unanimous in our pick that Moses Talma for the final time is the SimBoxx prospect of the year. So nice easy start there, Jamie. I thought there was going to be a bit of an and an ahhing, but like you say, there's only really one winner, and to say that he fought for less than three combined rounds across his two appearances, and he's still done enough to be an unanimous winner.
Yeah, of course. It's just he's a special talent, and I honestly cannot wait to see over the next few years what he's going to achieve. I think he could go on and cement himself as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Not the greatest because that's another debate all for itself, but he can definitely put his mark up there as one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah, definitely. And we look forward to January 24th, the magnificent seven card here in Manchester from Queensbury. Love those shows, Jamie. You know, where they have six, seven fights, equally matched, evenly matched fights. Alex Murphy's on there against Josh Holmes. I interviewed Alex Murphy last night. The interview's available on the SimBoxx YouTube channel as we speak. But Jermaine Franklin, just before we quickly move on to our next category, is he the guy to take Moses some rounds? We've seen him go the distance with Anthony Joshua, with Dillian White. Didn't look so convincing in his last fight, but you know everyone's due an off night. But are we expecting Jermaine
I'd like
Franklin to be the guy that goes a few rounds with Moses?
I'd like to think that he can give him a few rounds, but at the same time, like I don't think Franklin's on that level. And I think we might probably see another Dillian White here where he just gets blasted out quite early. I think he's a weird one with Moses. I think I've said this before on the podcast. Like, do you step him up too soon and put him in with Kabayel, you know, um, Sanchez, somebody of that ilk we know he's a good fighter, very experienced, has done the rounds. Because I don't think these fighters are going to be. I don't think we're going to see much improvement from Italma fighting. No disrespect to Franklin, he's a good operator, and we've seen that he caused AJ a few troubles. He caused Dillian White a few troubles, but he got beat quite convincingly in both the fights. So no, I can't really see him going too far into this fight, and I think this is just another stepping stone to give Moses a big fight against a big name. But who that name will be, I don't know. It's all up in the air.
We look forward to that show, and we look forward to a big year for Moses Atama. We will cover that show in more depth closer to fight week. Let's move on to our second category. This is UK Fighter of the Year. Um, this was one that I did split in between having a international and a UK nomination because I thought that it was rightful winners in their own right. I think I'll chuck my nomination out there first. We'll kind of go back and forth. You go first, I go first. For me, this is probably the clearest winner in terms of zero debate. I've got a couple of honourable mentions that I'll chuck out there. Firstly, Jazza Dickens, you know, the Cinderella man. He seems to have been around for an ever and a day. You know, a great guy in and out of the ring. He manages fighters. He's a fighter himself. Started off the year with beating Manchester's own Zelfa Barrett in a fight. I think it was 4 or 5 to 1 with the bookmakers, and he soundly beat Zelfa Barrett. You know, when I seen that fight made, I thought, okay, you know, this is a credible opponent for Zelfa, and they'll go on to bigger and better things. No disrespect to Jazza. Jazza made a laughing stock of those odds, those predictions, and he beat Zelfa well. And then he gets a WBA interim world title fight or regular title fight or one of the trinkets from that organization, and he beat Albert Batragazayev. I want to say I slaughtered his name there, but just the same way Jazza slaughtered him in the ring. You know, he was another big underdog in that fight, and you know I caveated that well there. But Jazza Dickens put on the performance of his life, and he stopped him inside 4 rounds, picked up the interim title, and now look what he's gone on to be rewarded with. He's got a big fight in Dublin with Anthony Kakachi. So for me, Jazza Dickens is an honourable mention at the very least. Is anyone out there that you are chucking as an honourable mention?
Yeah, no, do you know what? It's weird this because he was going to be one on my mind to go with as an honourable mention. I don't think we could give him the award of the best, but he had. Yeah, I can't disagree with him being an honourable mention because I love Jazz. So maybe there's I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit too thingy because I love him, but I think yeah, from what he's done, you know, he's always been in and around there. He's always fought the best. Never really had that big moment, and it looked like he was being fed. He was going to be fed to the slaughters by
Yep.
having that Barrett fight. That was the whole talk around. It was, you know, he was being fed to the lamb, being fed to the slaughter, and he was going to get punished by Zelf, and Zelf was going to go on to fight for world titles, and he completely flipped the script. And anyone who knows Jazza, like you said, top lad, you know, top professional, and boy, does that guy have a heart. I don't think there's many with a bigger heart in boxing than Jazza. He's come through a lot, and he's still there, and he's still in your face all the time. And yeah, you know, he's getting his just rewards for all the work he's put in over the years.
Absolutely. I mean, who could say, you know, he's coming on, is it 10 years ago, 11 years ago that he fought Rigondo and he was stopped and then he was getting beat by Kid Galahad and fights like that. And 10 years later, he's one of it. We only got like a handful of world champions in the UK, is it 3 or 4 or something like that, you know, and Jazza
Yeah,
Dickens wears that title with pride. So yeah, shout out to Jazza Dickens. Let's get into my nomination, and I think boringly we're going to be unified in terms of our predictions here because my UK Fighter of the Year is Fabio Wardley. It can't not be, in my opinion. The comfort behind win against Justice Honey. We was at the Barnsley show, the Callum Simpson European Super Middleweight title fight. I think we met outside the stadium or as he was coming out of the stadium and he was like, oh, I think Fabio's got away with one here. He was, he's taking a bit of a pace. And then when I watched the fight back, taking a bit of a pasting was an understatement, man. That
Yeah,
was a terrific night in Barnsley, but it was even more of a terrific night down at Portman Road in Ipswich. Fabio Wardley, hometown fighter, he was meant to fight Jarrell Miller. That fell apart. Just as Honey stepped in as somewhat of an unknown quantity. I don't think he's going to be the first name off the tip of the tongue of a casual fan, if you like, us in the business, if you like. Know who Justice Honey is. We know about his amateur pedigree and that he was screaming out for a big fight and a big opportunity. And he was beating him from pillar to post for 9, 10 rounds. And then
yeah, yeah.
Fabio Wardley uncorks his hellacious right hand and stops him fully in his tracks, stops him completely and wins the fight. And then not only that, he then goes on to take a fight with Joseph Parker, where he was a huge underdog. And in one of the fights of the year, he stopped Joseph Parker, and Joseph Parker was on the run of form that was arguably the best in heavyweight boxing, if not in all of boxing. He, stopping Wilder, beating Wilder, sorry, and then stopping Zhang and stopping Bacola. He was missed out on the Dubois fight. He looked like he was next in line for Usyk. And it was just one fight too many for Joseph Parker. You kind of feel for him and everything that's come out afterwards about failing drug tests and whatnot. We hope that he clears his name and that he's not done any wrongdoing because that really would be, if he was doing a category of disappointment of the year, for me, it'd be Joseph Parker failing a drug test because I just did not see that
Yeah,
coming.
yeah.
Um,
Never.
Even though it seems to be for recreational drugs and not performance enhancing drugs, either way, a failed test is a failed test and we wish him the best in trying to clear that up. Fabio Wardley beating him in the fashion that he did. Both guys looked out at the feet at different moments, and Fabio Wardley stops him in the 11th. Bearing in mind, I had a couple of quid on Fabio Wardley to knock him out in the 11th at 80 to 1. I'll just
Yeah,
stick that in there. I've been waiting.
yeah.
I've been waiting to get that in there. But yeah, and then not only that, he gets elevated into full WBO heavyweight world champion
Yeah.
when Usyk relinquished the belt. So are we also sticking a caveat on here that Usyk stuck in Wardley? I don't think I'll go that far.
No, no,
Don't
we
come,
can't
don't
be.
come lynching me
We...
now. I was just chucking it out there for the interest. But yeah, my nomination is Fabio Wardley, and I'm sure if I go out on a limb, you're somewhere near similar to me.
Well, I hate to shock you, mate, but you're right. You are right. You can't. It can't be anybody else, mate. And the maddest thing is about Wardley is, and we've said it like after the Honey fight, I said he's basically our version of Wilder. That's what I said after the Justice Honey fight. I was like, he's our version of Wilder because he doesn't win the boxing matches, but he puts her away.
Yeah.
And I actually thought Justice would have beat him. I actually thought Gormley were going to beat him. I thought Fraser Clark were going to beat him, and I thought Fraser Clark were going to beat him in the rematch. And I definitely had Parker beating him. So his last five opponents, and I'm not the only one. There's loads of people in the boxing world that didn't have him winning any of these fights, and he's just gone on one after the other, putting them away, even when it doesn't look like he's going to win. And the Parker one was just a testament because there was times where Parker would get into him.
Yeah.
And there was times where you're like, oh, he's Wilder looking a bit hurt here. And he stood his ground. I'll bet you won't agree because you were money on it. It was maybe a bit of a premature stoppage. But he got the job done. He had him badly hurt at the end of the 10th and then obviously put everything into it in round 11. And depending on who you are and what you like, it's a bad stoppage, it's a good stoppage. It's up for debate. But he got the job done. And like you said, he then became WBO world champion. And who would have thought 2 years ago you would be saying Fabio Wardley is the WBO world champion and the only British world champion? Like we've just had Fury, AJ, Daniel Dubois, and then it's Fabio Wardley. And it's no disrespect to Fabio Wardley, but you wouldn't put he's not the name that goes in there, and that's why he has to be the fighter of the year, the UK fighter of the year, because you've overcome so many obstacles, and he's the top man. He's now the top man, and everyone's now gunning for him. And it's just what a career from somebody that's got no amateur background,
Yeah.
few white collar fights, and it's crazy because you wouldn't see it's mad because you wouldn't see that in any other division. But fair play to him because he's obviously training hard. He's training with the best, and he has got one hell of a right hand. One hell of a right hand.
You know what I think? Aside from fighting Usyk, I think the greatest compliment, or one of the greatest compliments we can pay Fabio Wardley is I don't think he goes into another fight where they'll dine out on that lack of amateur pedigree, this ex-white collar fighter, because he's more than that now. I think with Usyk, they'll dig into it because of Usyk's extensive amateur background, and they'll compare the two, when this elite amateur and this guy that's come from a rocky kind of story. But anyone else, I think, no, we look at him and we think he's beat Justice Hunter, he's beat Joseph Parker, he's beat David Adeleye, he's beat Fraser Clark. He's really building up a solid body of work as a professional heavyweight boxer. He's there on merit. It's not like he's stumbled into a lucky fight. The stars aligned for Fabio Wardley to become world champion. The body of work is there, and it's a body of work that's going to start matching up to these other heavyweight contenders where it's like, well, who have you beat? Well, I beat this guy. And who else have you beat? Well, I beat this guy. Done Fraser Clark in a round. I avenged a draw where I should have probably stopped him. And the body of work is really there for Fabio Wardley. And I think that's the biggest compliment is that we're going to get away from that ex-white collar fighter narrative because he's a heavyweight world champion, a bona fide heavyweight world
Yeah,
champion. And no doubt he'll want to get in there and when he has his first defense, it'll feel like he's winning it for the first time, similar to like when Daniel Dubois got upgraded to the IBF title holder. He probably didn't really feel like the full champion until he knocked out Anthony Joshua. Although Fabio Wardley beating Joseph Parker is a more than credible way of being upgraded from an interim title holder. But yeah, just for me, I think Fabio Wardley and a great guy as well. We've had him on the channel in the early days. He doesn't answer my WhatsApps anymore, so I'll get over that, I'm sure. But we had him on the channel in the early days, and he's a really articulate guy, and he could have chose to be one of many professions and to be so well spoken, so almost softly spoken out the ring. He hits some sort of switch when he gets in between those ropes. He like you say,
yeah,
he becomes the Wilder for the UK. That power, that instinct, that killer instinct, the guts, the dark places that he goes to. Scary, scary man, and he gets out the ring, and
yeah.
then he's everybody's best friend again. What a guy Fabio Wardley is.
Yeah, they're the scariest as well. The ones that are the nicest ones, one of the scariest people, mate.
Absolutely. Let's move on to our third of four categories. Um, Fight of the year. Do you want to chuck in your
Fight of
honorable
the year.
mention? Yeah, fight of the year.
All right, so my honourable mention
Yeah.
is going to be Chris Eubank versus Conor Benoit. Right, I'm going to put that as my honourable mention, and people are going to be like, "What? He's mad! Like that's got to be fight of the year." And yeah, it would have been if Callum Smith and Boatse didn't go toe to toe on that Riyadh season card. I think for me, that was an unbelievable fight. Obviously, Eubank and Ben was, but for me, oh, I've got into my thing. Yeah, I was supposed to go into me next pick,
Yeah.
but yeah, no. My actual for me, the fight of the year had to be Callum Smith versus Joshua Buatsi. I think obviously they had the story of the Eubanks and Ben, and that played a big part of it. But I think where both fighters were of their careers and how much it meant for either fighter to win that, and for so long we've waited for a big British light heavyweight dust up with because we've got some fantastic light heavyweights that have not fought, and it was a case of the champion, the ex-champion Callum Smith, who's been there, done it at super middleweight, and then Buatsi, who we've always been waiting for. See, is he going to take that world title? Because he's always been good, and it was just it was that good of a card. It was that good of a fight. It made the whole card not as good, even though it was a great card and great fights. That's how great of a fight it was. It kind of dulled the rest of the card because the action weren't the same. And so for me, and you might disagree, but for me, it has to be that one for me.
Now, this is interesting. This is what we've been waiting the whole podcast for, a bit of debate. And this is really, really interesting because one of us has got to convince the other one to flip the order. Because my second pick, my honorable mention, so I don't even need to gas it up because you've just said everything that it is. My fight of the year is Chris Eubank versus Conor Ben one. My honorable mention goes to Joshua Buatsi versus Callum Smith. And I tell you one of the main reasons why I've gone with Conor Ben, Chris Eubank. The mainstream appeal, the backstory, the controversy. A lot of people say, the failed drug test, the egg incident, which I was front row for, so that I love the memory of that. But I bought into the whole WWE theme, the backstories, the caveats, the narratives. I bought into it all. I couldn't immerse myself more in the build up to that fight. I bought into every bit. Chris Eubank Senior turning up, he's here. That if we done a category for moment of
Oh
the
yeah,
year, if we done a category for moment of the year or the moment of the decade that wasn't fight related, that is up there in all of sports. For me, Chris Eubank Conor Ben is the fight of the year above because it took place in the UK. Joshua Buatsi, Callum Smith, it had headlined at the M&S Arena, is it now in Liverpool? It used to be the Echo Arena, or if it was at the Manchester Arena, or if it was at the O2 Arena, and it had that blood and guts and angry atmosphere. We've been there at many a fights. It has 10, 12, 15, 20,000 screaming fans, 50% Smith, 50% Boatsa. And that fight deserves that. And take nothing away from the two guys. They put on an absolute classic, but it was opening, the card of the century. And it deserved a little bit more than that, in my opinion. He got paid handsomely, got paid very, very well, but it doesn't beat Chris Eubank, Conor Ben one in terms of entire spectacle. And the fight produced those guys. We talk about them being the sons of the fathers. They grew up with silver spoons. They didn't need to fight. The places them two went in that fight. We talk about Fabio Wardley going to dark places. Those two guys were slinging leather for 12 hard, grueling rounds. And at no point did I leave the edge of my seat unless I was standing up and screaming. It was one of those kind of fights. And if there was one intangible, the fact that the rematch was a bit of a dull affair, aside from
yeah.
seeing 50 Cent do that ring walk with Chris Eubank Jr., that was amazing. But yeah, back to the first fight. Yeah, for me, Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Ben, fight of the year.
Yeah, do you know what? You've argued it quite well because it was just on the basis of the boxing side and just them fighting. For me, it's Callum Smith, Boatse. But when you bring into the whole spectacle of it, you're right. Selling out Tottenham Hotspurs, he's here and all that. Do you know what? You're getting me gas now. I'm getting gas thinking about it again. And you know what? You're right. I'm gonna have to yield on this. I'm gonna have to let you take the Eubank and Ben first fight as the thing because you are. Do you know what? You're right. It was in the UK. It was a massive spectacle. There was so much on the line. There was the family history. That's probably why it's going to teeter it for me.
Yeah.
But I do think on the basis of the best fight I'd watched that year, that was a close second to the Boatsi Callum Smith, very close second. But because of the spectacle, because of everything that was surrounding it, like you said, the controversies, then yeah, it's got to be. I've got to yield. I've got to give you that one. Let Luke take the win on that one.
Yeah, so as much as I'll gloat and I'll revel in the glory of my pick being number one. It is a very close number one and number two, so we can agree to disagree. But both great fights in their own regard, amongst other great fights in 2025. We'll move on to the biggest award, if you like, the SimBoxx Let's Talk Boxing podcast Fighter of the Year. I'll chuck out my honorable mention. It could be many a different winner for this for many different reasons. My honorable mention is Naoya Inoue, pound for pound superstar and multi-weight, multi-time undisputed world champion. Defended his undisputed titles four times in 12 months, which he's not took on the highest caliber of opponents that we've seen him take on in recent times, but he beat Kim Cardenas, Akhmadiev, and most recently Picasso. And he beat them all in different kind of ways. And for the first time, we've seen Inoue really come over some adversity. He was in some good fights. He was in some dominant fights. He's a joy to behold for me, Naoya Inoue. And I think we're in the kind of stages with him where at his age, with his accomplishments, the only thing that's going to beat him is going up too far in weights. That if he chews off a little bit more, then he can digest. I think Junto Nakatani for a long time for me was going to be the guy that's going to chase him and hunt him down and become a 50-50 fight. We can't judge somebody off one poor performance, but Junto Nakatani didn't look great in his debut in Naoya Inoue's weight class on that ring card on the 27th of December. I think the real threat now for Naoya Inoue, if he's not going up in weight, is another pound for pound superstar that's following in his footsteps in terms of going through the weights, and that's Bam Rodriguez. Bam Rodriguez as well. He's another one that could be an honorable mention for Fighter of the Year.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
for me, Bam Rodriguez, Naoya Inoue, we're going to do a 2026 Fantasy Fight podcast next week, so I won't get too far into that. But that is certainly a contender for a potential Fight of the Year in 2026. But as it is, my Fighter of the Year is Terence Bud Crawford. You kind of go with the activity of Inoue, or you go out with the stand, or you go with the standout victory of Terence Crawford when he beat pound for pound superstar Canelo Alvarez. He became undisputed super middleweight world champion, and it was the manner of the victory for me, Jamie. He was dominant against a guy that was two weight classes above him, given that Crawford's previous fight to that was against Israel Madrimov when he won a title under 54 pounds. But if we're being realistic, that was only one fight at 154. In true
Yeah.
senses, Terence Crawford was going up from 147 to 168. And in a time where we've got all these rehydration clauses and stipulations, he was like, no, 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 I'm going up to his weight class. We'll fight at 168. No rehydration clauses. I'll fight the man that gets in the ring. And it was, I wouldn't say a, a kind of fight where Canelo was a hot favorite. I think he was a steady favorite. There was, a few people picking Terence Crawford, but I think a lot of people thought Canelo was just going to be too big, too strong, too experienced. And that age-old adage in boxing that a good big one will always beat a good little one. And for me, Terence Crawford ripped up the script. It was a packed-out arena. Netflix done a hell of a job promoting it. It had that big fight feel to it. And Terence Crawford,
Yeah, yeah.
at 38 years of age, coming off the Spence win, the Madrimov win, he's now getting his flowers and he's now respected as a pound-for-pound megastar, which he is. And he put on the performance of a lifetime. And at times, I don't want to sound disrespectful to Canelo. It arguably looked easy for Crawford, in my opinion. He beat Canelo at every which way you want to beat him at, in close, at distance, out fighting him, out punching him, out manning him. If anything, you thought that Terence Crawford was the natural 168 at times in that fight. So for me, unequivocally, it's Terence Crawford as the fighter of the year.
Yeah, do you know, like going off what you said, I like your honourable mentions because I didn't really think of anyway, and it's quite amateur for me as well because I forgot that he actually fought 4 times this year, which is massively unheard of for an undisputed champion to fight 4 times a year. I actually only thought he fought 3, so fair play, like I've learned something new there. But he weren't my honourable mention. My honourable mention was actually right, Shakur Stevenson. Um, which might be out there for people. But I'm with Shakur, like I'm a massive fan of his boxing. I think he is so good. He's like everything, his range, his timing, his shot selection, his speed. Like he's just he's so good that he made people think he were boring and he wasn't like oh it was a runner as you say. And obviously, he had the fight with Josh Padley, which was obviously he won that by stoppage. But for me, it was when he took on William Zepeda, and he Zepeda was a killer. And it's the same with like the Canelo and Crawford. It was so one sided,
Yeah.
and like people were like, oh, there was moments where Zepeda was putting it on him, and I was watching, like, he's not even landing.
Yeah.
He's like he baited him into being in his range, and just picked him off at will. And his boxing IQ is absolutely phenomenal. And I think the only reason he probably isn't fighter of the year is because you've got the likes of Crawford and Inoue that are out there at the moment. But I'm telling you, like, if he goes on to beat Tio and goes on to have a stellar year this year, there's no arguments as to say that he can't be next year's fighter of the year because he is so unbelievably talented, and I think he gets a lot of slack. And I think he's sort of like his career sort of mirrored a bit of Crawford's, where
Yeah.
he's not had a lot of big fights. He's been avoided on the whole talk of
I think
money. There's no money.
well, the Americans like to call it on the other side of the street, don't they, with Shakur Stevenson, similar to Terence Crawford, that he was with Top Rank and that all the other contenders and champions seem to be across the other side of the street with PBC. And I think that's the issue that Shakur's picked up. It's similar to Crawford, that when these other fighters are in the primes, you likes of Gervonta Tank Davis or Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia, at one time or another, they maybe been with PBC or with Matchroom, and then Shakur's come over to Matchroom, and I'm not sure if he's still with him or whether he's kind of in between promoters at the minute. But now he's the one thing that, and I was going to jump in and say it there, the one thing that I'll give Shakur Stevenson, he seems to get a lot of hate that maybe he's not this knockout artist similar to a Gervonta Tank Davis or um, Teofimo Lopez when we've seen Teofimo Lopez produce some of these highlight reel knockouts. But the one thing that I will say about Shakur Stevenson, and it starts at the end of January and he takes on Teofimo Lopez, is he's been screaming for these big fights. I can never tell you a time when I've logged onto Twitter or Instagram or read boxing news and seen this big fight isn't happening because of Shakur Stevenson. You know, we've seen Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia fight, but we've not seen Tank in with Teofimo Lopez. We've not seen him in with Devin Haney when they was all mixing it around 135. At no point have I ever seen Shakur Stevenson saying, no, 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 you're not bringing enough to the table. He seems to be the guy who is arguably the most talented of this crop of lightweight slash 140 pounders that seems to be the most talented, but is the one that's willing to put it all on the line each and every time. You know, Devin Haney's accomplished a lot in his career, don't get me wrong, but for me, Shakur Stevenson is the most talented of that bunch, and he seems to be the one most desperate to put it all on the line and to prove he's the best.
Yeah, and the money thing's not an issue to him. What I like about him is obviously we all, you know, you're in the fight game. You need to get paid as much as possible. But he's one of them. When you talk to him, he's like, nah, like I just want to be the best. Obviously, being the best, money's going to come anyway, and he knows that. And he's happy to take less money. It's the other fighters that don't want to. They don't want to take less money to fight him because at times Shakur's not a big household name, which was Crawford's issue for years and years. Like for Crawford to get recognised, he had to go out and beat Spence, which he did. And I think it's now Shakur's time to really explode if he goes on to beat Tio, and that's a big ask because I think out of both of I think out of the crop that we've mentioned, them for me personally, I think them two are the best of that crop, and they're going to go at it, and it's a bit of a 50-50 because they're both completely different types of boxers, and obviously Tio's already a big name anyway because of his personality. If Shakur wins that, he's going to be a superstar. He's going to be a mega, and nobody can then ignore him. And he's going to have, he's basically going to hold all the chips then. And you're going to have to come and fight him and prove you're the best and not him.
You know what? We're going off on a bit of a tangent here, and I don't mind at all. But and we'll get into the preview of that fight a couple of weeks down the line. But it's one for me that it doesn't seem to have gripped the attention. Maybe it's come out because the announcement was around the holidays, and I don't know. Maybe is it Teofimo Lopez's erratic behavior out of the ring? It doesn't seem to have captured the imagination, as in, like, you know what, we've actually got this fight on here. It's signed, it's been announced, we've got a fight poster, which a lot of people look at as the blue tick to say, right, this fight's on, the green light,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
go. We've got it all, and for me, I keep seeing the poster, you know, when people are announcing, oh, these fights are taking place in January. I'm like, no, this fight is taking place in January. All the others, with all due
Yeah,
respect,
yeah.
the magnificent seven card, you know, I'll be able to say that without stuttering one day. But all these other big fights that are taking place in January, all fall in line behind that. That's the fight so far in 2026. And in terms of fights on paper, we're going to have to go some way till we see a fight announced that's going to be better than that. So we don't want to get into it too much just because, like I say, we're going to have a preview of it down the line. But yeah, if you finish off on your part on Shakur there and then give us your fight of the year.
Yeah, no, just to touch on what you said, it was it's very surprising to see there's not a lot of marketing on it, and there's not a lot of people talk. Obviously, hardcore boxing fans are lapping it up. They're all talking about it, but you'd think it would be one that the casuals would want to come in, and maybe that's something to do with Shakur because I know like with Tio, he's very much in the public eye, but Shakur's not as media. I wouldn't say media. He's good. He's media friendly, but he's not. You know, he's not out there doing the media stuff because he just wants to fight. So maybe that might have a part to do with it. But going back to our fighter of the year and to sort of come back onto topic, there's no arguments from me. It's like we said, we wanted to sit here and have a bit of a debate, but it was quite nailed on, weren't it? 2025 of who the best fighters were, who the prospects were, what the fights of the year were, and there's no arguments on Terence Crawford. I can't. He was literally my pick. As soon as you messaged through, I saw the first big fight. I thought before it even like thought about anything, I was like, yeah, that's Crawford. There's no argument to it. What he did, like you said, he looked the natural 168-pounder in there. In Canelo, as much as people like to say, oh, he's declined. It's only lost to the best. It only ever lost to the very best. And he was beating everybody there. But for some reason, he just was outgunned, outsmarted, outfought, outmuscled, and there was like that moment in the fight where he gets caught. and he goes, spins his head round, and he's just like, "Purr." That was the moment I knew you've lost this fight. It's come away from you now,
Yeah.
and that was mental to see someone of Canelo's ability just not have any answers. And that goes to show how great of a fighter Crawford is, because, like we said, a good big man always beats a good little man. And he completely came in and went, nah, what's what I'm about, mate, because I'm going to show him who the big daddy is round here. And he spanked him, and weren't even a close fight. I don't think, if there's anybody out there that's saying it's a close fight, you need to get off Canelo's, you know what,
Yeah.
because there's no way anyone watching that could have said it was a close fight. And for me, that's why it's fight of the year, because to go out there and do that, and was it free weight undisputed that he became
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. Yeah.
process of doing it?
Five-weight
Yeah.
world champion,
Do you know?
three-time undisputed. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just crazy. And to think it was massively avoided from the start of his career as well. So big up Terence Crawford. No arguments from me. Nice, easy one. Fight of the year. You're the man.
Absolutely. You know what? Just to put the finishing touches to our awards, I think the most beautiful thing about giving Terence Crawford the Fighter of the Year is that he recently announced his retirement as well, which, given that there's so much money left on the table, I think, he's a very, very, very wealthy man. But the big fights, as we've said, Spence, Madrimov, and Canelo. The Madrimov fight is going to be, it's not somebody that would have sold to the casual audience, but it was part of a Riyadh season card, so he's going to be very, very well paid for that. Of course, the Canelo fight was mega bucks, the Spence fight was mega bucks, but we're talking about a guy that had over 40 professional fights, won world titles in five weights, undisputed in three. We're only talking serious money in those last three fights, and for him to walk away from that, if he's gone at 38, nearly 39 years of age, I'm done. I've accomplished everything. He doesn't strike me as the type that you're going to see in casinos, in strip clubs, in bars, chucking his money away. He just seems like a guy that knows, you know what, I've made it. My family's set, my next generation and their generation and their generation are set. He doesn't scream to me that somebody that is going to live an outwardly outlandish like lifestyle. He's not going to be too lavish with it. I wouldn't have thought. I might be wrong, but I feel like that's the most beautiful part of this is that he retired, left money on the table because it wasn't there anymore. He accomplished everything he wanted, and that's a sign of a great fighter bowing out at the right time, like Andre Ward, like Joe Calzaghe, like Floyd Mayweather. They all done it at the right time and kept that O intact.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things as well. I'm glad he retired, because there weren't really much out there for him to accomplish, apart from maybe having another big fight at 168. But no, when you're someone that's that good, Father Time catches up with everybody, and like you said, he's going to be touching 39 soon, and to do what you've done, I'm glad that you've retired. I'm glad he's retired, because I wouldn't want to see somebody of his ilk, unfortunately do like, and it's not really the same, but like when Mike Tyson got beat by McBride, it was a fight where never in a million years does Mike Tyson lose to a McBride,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things I would not have wanted to see Crawford go too
Well,
far.
the one
And
for
what I
me
like
would
about
always
him is,
be Roy Jones. You look at Roy Jones, if he had bowed out after winning heavyweight world title, he went up for a lot
yeah,
of different
yeah,
weights. He beat John Ruiz. If he had bowed out, then you look, don't no disrespect to the people that come afterwards and beat him, but he was a shot faded fighter at that point, and Roy Jones arguably would have went down as the pound for pound all time number one had he had knocked it on the head when he won that world title. But as it is,
yeah,
he
yeah,
went on to lose to people that couldn't lace his gloves in all due respect. And Crawford,
yeah,
like you say, at his age starts coming back down through the weights. Maybe the weight cut isn't the same. Because I thought he was going to go to 160, and fill in the gap that he's won 135, 140, 147, 154, 160, 168. He was never going to go up to 175. Let's not get it twisted. He was never going up to the
no,
Andre
no,
Giant. I thought, if anything, he'd come back to 160. And maybe that's where the danger would have lied. If he'd come back to 160, the motivation wasn't there. That the expectation was that he was just going to mop up a title, maybe, with a Yanibek or a Carlos Adames. And they're the nights where he comes unstuck because it's people that aren't as good as him, aren't as talented as him, but he goes from being the hunter to the hunted. And that's where it all falls apart. And I'm glad that he's not gone down that route. The fire
yeah.
isn't burning as bright as what it might have done 6 months ago for the Canelo fight, and he's got out at the right time for me. Um, Jamie, it was an honor to go through the SimBoxx 2025 End of Year Awards. We kept it short, we kept it snappy, we kept it sweet, apart from the times we went off on a tangent, but we do love to do that. Let's close out the podcast with a little look forward because this podcast is going to go out before the first two big fights. if you like, of 2026. Amanda Serrano winning last week. But in terms of UK boxing, Dalton Smith goes for the 140-pound WBC super lightweight title against the ever dangerous Subriel Matias. Even though he's got a couple of losses on the record, he's got 22 knockouts and 23 wins. This fight takes place in New York. It's not going to be promoted by a mainstream promoter, if you like, so I think he's a bit iffy where we're going to be able to watch this fight. I also seen someone on Twitter saying that it's going to be close to £42 to be able to buy the pay-per-view in the UK, which is a bit iffy, in my
Scandalous.
opinion. But let's focus on the fight. Dalton Smith, 18-0, not put a foot wrong yet. One of our best talents, and he goes in for the world title for the first time. You excited to see him go over there and do a job on Subriel Matias?
Yeah, I am excited to see him go over there. It's always good to see a British fighter go over to the States and try to stake a claim for a world title. And he is one of our best prospects. But I also think this is a very hard fight for him. A very, very hard fight. It's one I think he can win, but it's also one where, if he got stopped or, he lost unanimous decision, I wouldn't be massively shocked. I wouldn't be sat there going, no way has he lost that. And fair play to him for going in there 18-0. He's not really fought the biggest of names to stand in instead for this fight. But he's earned his ranking. He's earned the opportunity to take this fight, and I want him to take the fight. And I want him to win the fight. But it's gonna be very, very hard for him. But he's no slouch. He's no slouch to his opponent. And like you said, yeah, he's got a couple of losses, but he's beat some big names himself. He's hurt some big names. And I just think with Dalton, he's not been in with somebody of that experience. But sometimes, like we've seen in the past, you need to showcase how good you really are. You need a really good dance partner, and that could just be the case with this one, where Dalton needs this opponent to show what he's really, really about. Because he's shown flashes of brilliance, but for me, he's never shown something where I've gone, wow, world class, world. He could be world champion tomorrow. And that's no disrespect to Dalton because he's a good fighter, but I think this is not going to be as straightforward as what some of the casual British fans are thinking. It's yeah, because they don't know his opponent.
Yep.
So they're just like, yeah, some nobody. We've not heard of him. Yeah, Dalton Smith, have heard of him. He's going to go in and kill him. I'm telling you, that will not be the case. It could be a big 50-50 banger. But if I'm Dalton Smith, there's going to be times where he's going to have to trade with him. But Dalton's got a box. I don't think Dalton can go in and try and stand and bang with his opponent. I think he's got to go in and he's going to have to stand and bang at times because he's a come forward pressure fighter. So he's going to force him into doing that. But he's got to pick the timing. He's got to choose the time when to do that, Dalton. He's not got to let him dictate when he's going to stand and trade with him. He's got to decide that himself. And that's where his victory will come. But it's easier for us to sit here and say that.
I think for me, Jamie, there's a massive asterisk attached to this fight, and I appreciate a lot of the points that you made there, and I'll give you my 10p's worth in a second. But Subriel Matias recently failed a drug test for Ostarine. Now, the controversy arises because we've seen too many a times in recent years, whether it be Conor Benn, whether it be Dillian White, Tyson Fury, Canelo Alvarez, big name boxers failed drug tests and it either get swept under the rug, whether they swerve the actual outcomes, nothing actually comes to public light around why, is it tainted supplements, is it contamination, is it outright juicing? The WBC haven't covered themselves in glory with this because they're allowing the fight to go on. And now the basis of the fight going on is because he had 0.85 or 0.085 milligrams or nanograms, however they measure it, of Ostarine in his failed test. Now, that is below the one. So it's 0.085. The maximum amount is 0.01 or something like that, zero point 0.1. So it was like 0.15 milligrams and nanograms under the threshold that the WBC set. That doesn't get away from why it was in there. Could he have been microdosing, where these athletes, and this is all speculation. I'm not accusing Subriel Matias of anything. So if somehow he ever was to see this, don't throw me under the bus and don't kill me. Um,
Only for
but if he failed for that drug and he could be microdosing, it's a thing with athletes. They could be microdosing where they're just supplementing the body with just enough to get the benefits of this performance enhancing drug without actually flagging up in a failed test. And then when they do fail a test, they can go and, oh, look, it's microscopic amounts. I'm not actually using it's a contaminated supplement or whatever it might be. The other end of that is they cleared him to fight because it was under the threshold that they would implement. But then they also said that he is on probation for a year and he has to pay for extra drug testing out of his own pocket. Why are you punishing a man that you've already said is innocent by your rules? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If he's coming within their limits, he's had this in his system, but it's not enough to charge him with performance enhancing drug taking. Why is there a punishment attached to it? It doesn't make sense
yeah,
to me that. And bearing in mind,
the
Subriel Matias is a
WBC.
man that's fought somebody, and unfortunately, that opponent has gone on to die after their fight due to the injuries that he sustained in a fight with Subriel Matias. We're talking about an extremely dangerous man here, and he's got you know amounts of drugs in his system, not regardless of the amount. Doesn't look good to me, Jamie.
Yeah, no, I know but to be fair, you're a big advocate when it comes to people popping for performing enhancers. Like I've known you a while now. You hate it. You can't stand it. Like, and the way you speak about Gerald Miller and some of the other people that have popped, like you can, and I'm the same. Like, you can't be getting popped for performance enhancers. The problem is, it just like you said, it just gets swept under the carpet, and to be fair, like. I didn't even bring it up then because it was swept under the carpet. Obviously it is a big news story, but it's the same like you mentioned the names Fiore, Canelo, Ben. It's sort of we don't talk about them anymore. We don't. It doesn't get brought up, and we talk about how good of fighters that they are and whatnot. And you know what, you're right. And I think the biggest issue we've got is the WBC are a joke. I think as an organisation, they're the worst one.
But the
They
thing is,
make
though,
their
is that
own
they
rules
they're
as they
putting
go along.
themselves on a pedestal. Rich O'Sullivan, he puts himself on a pedestal as the WBC clean fighting program. He does more in the public eye for clean boxing, but then doesn't follow through with the punishments correctly. So you kind of put yourself up there to say, look, this is what we're doing to clean up the sport, but also this is how we deal with people that are failing drug tests under our
Yeah.
jurisdiction. Doesn't make sense.
I think could be wrong. Bit of a conspiracy, for the conspiracy theorists out there. Ultimately, it comes down to money. I feel the sanctioning fees they're gonna lose out on by pulling these big names and saying nope, that's it, you're banned. I think it's going to hurt their pockets more than just going, oh, well, do you know what? We'll give you the 6 month, yeah, we've not really proven anything, but just for the sake of it, you're going to have to do a 6 month ban or a 12-month ban, but because you've not fought for 6 months, we'll take that into account. And I think it's all just to do with money in the long haul. Because there's no other reason why they're not following through with the whole clean boxing program. And then, like you said, you're not actually then implementing what you're saying you're going to do. Really, like in reality, like Miller, like he should be banned now for life. There shouldn't really be an argument as to is Miller allowed to fight again. I think obviously if you get popped, well, personally, I think if you get popped twice, it's got to be a you've
Yeah.
got to be a banned ultimately.
I think I think that when Tony Bellew comes out, and it depends whether he's mates with the person or not. He comes out and he puts some outlandish statements out there saying that, if you pop for performance enhancing drugs, you should be banned for life, first time out the game. But then you see Billy Joe Saunders go through issues, and Tony Bellew and Billy Joe Saunders get on, and you see Conor Benn go through issues, and he doesn't want to speak about it. Then I think for me, I think you can't really tier performance enhancing drugs because in one way or another, whether it makes you stronger, whether it makes you leaner, whether it helps you cut weight, whatever it might be, it's going to put you in a position to really hurt your opponent more than you naturally should be able to in an already deadly sport. But I think you see somebody like Jarrell Miller failed multiple drug tests for supplements, drugs, enhancing drugs that could only be put into the body via injection. There's no way you're contaminating anything there. That's straight up juicing. I think if it's contamination, like certain fighters have gone through, it happens, I guess, like especially at a level where you might not be able to employ your own people to be able to go through all these different supplements that you'll be taking, all these different foods, all this different stuff that you'll be taking in the lead up to a fight, and just, checking every single ingredient. I think if you fail in that kind of area, if you like Subriel Matias here, then that's a one strike. And I think if it's a two strike, you're out. Simple as that.
Yeah, yeah,
As
yeah,
brutal as it
yeah,
sounds, no matter how much money you generate by giving you 3% to these governing bodies, if it's cross-contamination and then you do it again, strict liability. And I'm
yeah,
being
yeah,
generous saying it's, give you one strike, it's strict liability. That's the only way around it. It's saying you as a human being are responsible for what goes in your body. Simple as that. Simple as
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And if we're not going to do that
I have to
because they're
agree.
scared
Yeah,
of losing the money, then let's go to a one strike, two strike, you're out. As simple as that.
yeah, yeah. Because you are right. I think, like you said, if you're taking something that can only be injected, then that's well, you're definitely cheating 100%. Obviously, you can get a cross contamination. It can happen.
Yeah.
Rare, but it can happen. But if it happens twice, it's like, come on, you can't eat contaminated food twice.
You're
Do you know,
clearly not
like
learned from your
you've
first
got to be
incident.
after the first time, then you've got to start putting the things in place. Go right, I can't afford to be popped again. But and like you said, getting a team to check everything that you're eating. If you have to do that, you have to do that. But there's got to be something in place where, no matter who you are, once you've had that, if it's cross contaminated, right? If you ever pop again, even if it's not your fault in the future, unfortunately you're going to be banned. But then could that open up a door to some people being sneaky? Because we've heard rumors in the past where things have been put in people's waters after
Yeah.
a fight, and whatnot. Could we end up seeing a bit of dodginess
Yeah.
happening that way? I don't know,
Absolutely.
but there needs to be something to
Mhm.
curb all the failed drug tests that are happening, and for them to keep fighting.
Absolutely. We're going off on a tangent, on a tangent, on a tangent, but it's got to be said at some point or another, if it's taking us smaller channels getting the message out there because some of the bigger channels won't meet it head on, then so be it, will be those guys. I want to bring you back round to the fight because I do find this a really interesting fight. And I thought for a long time, Subriel Matias was one of the most dangerous fighters on the planet. His power, his shot selection, his output, really, really dangerous fighter. I just think he's the bull to the matador with Dalton Smith. And I think if Liam Parrow can beat Subriel Matias in his home country, in his big homecoming fight, and with all due respect to Liam Parrow, Dalton Smith is a much more talented fighter than Liam Parrow. And I think Dalton Smith has got the skills that pay the bills. I think, he's not going to stand there and trade with him in terms of like a 3 round Hagler Hearns kind of shootout. But I think he'll fight in bursts, he'll fight in pockets. Dalton Smith will box the ears off Subriel Matias. And I don't want to fall into category of what you were saying before about the casual British fan thinks, oh, we don't know the Matias name. I know the Matias name. I know what he's about. I'm just high on Dalton Smith. I think we've always had this debate about Dalton Smith and Adam Azim. Dalton Smith is streets ahead of Adam Azim as it stands for me. I think Adam Azim is an extremely talented fighter. I think Dalton Smith is an extremely talented fighter that's at a level above us. We're speaking, and I think come Saturday night, the UK has a new WBC super lightweight world champion, and I'm doubling down on it because I put my prediction out there. It'll be on the YouTube channel as well, but I'm doubling down on it more on the podcast. I truly believe Dalton Smith does a job on Subriel Matias, and I'll be having a cheeky double on him as well to win on points. Get up
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so much.
there.
But no, I think it's a winnable fight for him. It is a
Yeah.
winnable fight.
But it's a losable fight as well. I'll give you that. It is a losable fight. Matias has the power to knock anybody out at 140
Yeah,
pounds.
yeah. And I think you're spot on, like you said, Liam Parrow, if he can beat you, then there's no reason why Dalton can't. I think they're a bit different fighters. I think Liam is, I think, quicker on his feet than Dalton. So it moves a little bit better. But I think you're right, and I touched on it as well. He's got to fight in bursts. It's got to be in bursts. He's got a box clever, and like I said, he's got to know when to stand and let his hands go, and then get out. And he can easily win it. But like I said, he's not come up against an opponent of this caliber yet, so that's going to be the big test for him. But I'd love him to do it, and then I'd love to go and see him and Adam Azim fight for the same world title and an all British affair, which could potentially, we could see another stadium fight in the UK with that in the future if he comes through it.
Definitely, it's a fight that is going to be building up. And not only that, imagine Dalton Smith being a world title holder in the same division as Teofimo Lopez, Shakur Stevenson, and those kind of fighters. So, yeah, we'll look forward to what might come. One fight that I do want to touch on before we close out, it's been a great podcast, a great start to 2026. We've got a lot off our chest, guys. If you've not already noticed, we've not spoke for a couple of months in terms of boxing on camera, and this is all coming out now. So, yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. But the big German Agit Kabayel, now the form heavyweight. He's overtook Joseph Parker for me after Joseph Parker's defeat to Fabio Wardley. Agit Kabayel, he's stopped Frank Sanchez, he's stopped Makhmudov, and he stopped, who did he stop in his last fight?
Yang. Stop Jelly Yang.
Yang, of course he did, and he overcome adversity in that fight as well.
Yeah, he got
Um,
dropped himself, yeah.
yeah, and he's fighting Damian Niebuhr, undefeated 17-0, Polish heavyweight, and it's a homecoming fight for Agit Kabayel. And I do like these kind of stories where these fighters from, Germany, it's been a fight country over the years, but it's not a real hotbed for talent at the minute. And to take someone like Agit Kabayel back to Germany in a big show, shout out to Queensbury and Frank Warren for doing that. It's a real feel-good moment, and I think in Damian Niebuhr, he's got an undefeated big punching opponent that he can look good against, and it sets him up for a big 2026. Because I want to see him more active. I think he's talented. I think his momentum, his run of form entitles him to bigger opportunities than what he's been getting. He's kind of been stuck in the mud in terms of seeing where the belts fragment and being next in line and everything else with these world titles kind of tied up with Dubois and Usyk and Fury and whatnot. For me, Agit Kabayel is at the very, very front of that queue. And we talk about Coley being up there in the rankings of the WBC. Everybody's been staying away from Agit Kabayel. They might call his name out in interviews, but when it comes to negotiations, we've not seen anyone running a fight Agit
No.
Kabayel. And for years and years, he was in the background for me.
Years,
When I
mate.
thought Fury was going to fight him and AJ was going to fight him, I'm like, who is this guy? And then you watch him fight, and you're like, this guy is the bollocks. And Saturday night, I think it's a homecoming fight. I think he's going to look destructive, knock out Neba, and set up a big year. I can't give it much more praise than that kind of.
Oh, no, he's a special fighter. And do you know what's funny about Kabayel is, do you not remember years ago he fought Derek Chisora for the
Yeah,
European belt in Monaco, yeah?
and it was a
And
stinker.
I didn't know who he was. And they all went on and said, oh, yeah, Derek didn't take his trainer with him. No, 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 no. Like at the time, you were probably thinking, yeah, yeah, he didn't take his trainer, didn't take it serious. This nobody's beat him. But then this nobody has been in the shadows, just quietly plodding along, winning, and then beating a bigger name, then beating a bigger name. And it's like, actually, do you know what? It weren't a case of back then that Chisora didn't have his trainer with him. It was the case of we was witnessing the start of a top heavyweight making his way in the game, and it's been a bit of a weird one because that was a long time ago.
Yeah,
That fight that he had, I wouldn't be surprised if it was about 8 years ago.
yeah, you're not far
I
wrong.
might
Yeah.
be wrong,
Mm.
but I've got in my head it was about 8 years ago, and he's not really, and like he's had his big wins, but he's still like not getting his opportunities. So I'm glad to see that he's fighting in a big hometown, selling out in front of his own fans. That yeah, he deserves that. But after this, he deserves a world title shot. Whether it be with Usyk, whether it be with Wardley, this man deserves his world title
Yeah.
shot. And there's a reason he's avoided because that boy can box for a heavyweight. That boy can box and he can move well. And yeah, I'm a big fan of him. Me, I think how many heavyweights do you see that work the body like he works the body? And to work the body, you've got to be in range. You've got to put yourself in dangerous positions, which he did against Zhang. He got caught, but it worked for him in the end
Yeah.
because it eventually tired him out to the point that he could stop him. And it was the same with I always butcher his name, Makhmudov,
Yeah.
and he did the same with him. Do you know what like?
But that one
Um,
was Makhmudov was this big scary. He's still a big scary Russian, but I mean in terms of
yeah,
being touted as the next big thing. Obviously, he's had his trials and tribulations since. But let's not get away from the fact that Kabayel was a 7-8 to 1 betting underdog with the bookmakers ahead of that Makhmudov fight, and he went in there and he made a joke of that. And as you say,
yeah.
he really
Well,
didn't
I
care
think I
about
think
Makhmudov.
Sanchez and Zhang. I think he was 2-3 to 1 on to beat them two both when they fought as well, which just shows it's a credit to him. He's a bit like Wardley, really, where he's been around a lot longer than Wardley, but he's had to do, he's
Yeah,
just gone in and done what he's had to do in the fights where you didn't think he was going to win, and he just keeps proving time and time again, and it's to the point where you can't deny this guy's ability,
yeah,
and he needs these big shots because I don't want him to do a Parker where you've got the opportunity to fight for the world title that you deserve and you could probably win. And then you just take that one fight too many because you're not getting that world title fight. You're trying to stay busy, and then it all comes undone. Because in heavyweight boxing, no matter how good you are, it's the only division where one shot does change everything.
absolutely. Very well put, Jamie. As I say, we covered a lot of ground there. We got a lot off our chest. I think it sets us up nicely to look forward as opposed to looking backwards. And that's exactly what we're going to do on next week's episode of the Let's Talk Boxing podcast. We're going to give our fantasy predictions for 2026. I appreciate you guys listening as always, for watching as always. Please hit that like button, that subscribe button, give us a share, give us a comment, any feedback. It's all took on board. We're also going to make this podcast available back on iTunes and Spotify as well. So make sure you check it out on there if you're on the go, on your commute to work, on your jog, in the gym, in the house. If you're not watching us on YouTube, listen to us on wherever you find your podcast. Jamie, it's been an absolute pleasure and a joy, and I'll see you next week.
See you next week. Pleasure's all mine.